Hello, my friends, it's your brother Hampton. I want to talk a little bit about patience and how it can help us achieve our goals faster. However, I feel like there is a slight misunderstanding about patience because it's mentioned in a lot of business groups, fitness groups, anything where progress requires time, or like car maintenance groups. The value of patience is brought up a lot, but I feel like it means different things to different people. So in my book that I'm writing, I'll write about it in a way that I call strategic patience, because there are some ways where patience can be used, as some of you may fear. It can be used as an excuse, like I'm being patient and biding my time when you're really just procrastinating. But there are other ways where patience is misunderstood, where it really can help you with your goals. It can help you better understand what you actually want, take your time, and avoid making mistakes that end up costing you more time than you otherwise would need to spend. So just to give you a quick summary of how I view patience, balance with ambition is I still myself try to work hard and fast towards the things that I want to do. Not because I feel like I have to, but for the things that I want to build, and just because I like doing it, I want to work hard and fast. I want to move quickly. I don't want to procrastinate and make decisions slow just for the sake of delaying them if I'm not going to know better. I'll sleep on things. I'll think about it. I'll research. I'll ask people. But if I'm really not sure about something, sometimes I'll just try it and learn from that decision. However, all of that is what some people would call microspeed. So day to day, we go fast. Day to day, we don't want patience. If we can get it faster, we're trying to move fast. And with that in mind, I want to think about patience in the long term. And when people who are similar to me in that regard, either greater or perhaps a little more early in the process, there's a tendency for us to get a little bit too ahead of ourselves sometimes and get stressed. Even some of us who are relatively stress tolerant can sometimes feel quite stressed from this. When there's a lot of stuff going on, you have all these goals, you want to accomplish big things. And once again, as I mentioned all the time, not just about money. So there's this idea of like, oh, you're working because you're greedy and you just want money. No, some people are working very hard towards environmental goals, towards trying to help other people, trying to enact a positive change in the world that might be entirely unrelated to business. A lot of that requires hard work, and a lot of it requires a lot of time. So it's helpful for us to remember, it's helpful for people to remember that good things do take time, and we sometimes have less time than we think, right? But other times we have more times than we think. That's why we hear a little bit of confusion over the role of patience in the world. I'll put it this way, a lot of people nowadays, we usually hear first that we have more time than we think, we're young, then there's the pushback against that where it's like, no, you're not as young as you think. And a good example of that is in your early 20s, you're often called young by a lot of people. But in your late 20s, as I've noticed, teenagers tend to call you older, right? And I assume, I don't know, that as you go in your mid 30s, 40s, mid 40s, and then 50s, mid 50s, more and more people refer to you jokingly as old. But that short 10-year span, you can do a lot of stuff in 10 years. But there's a difference where most people call you young, and then where some people start calling you old within that 10 years. But once again, you can do a lot in 10 years. And when someone's 16, 17, say 16, and I remember being 16 too, and they feel too pressured to, hey, I haven't accomplished this. I know my friends have done this. I don't even know what I want to do yet. There's all these things that I want to do. It's going to take a while for me to do. What should I do now? I do remind them, work hard, try to do a lot of stuff, but you could also fail at everything you were doing for the next 8-9 years, right? So remember you yourself 9 years ago versus now, that's 9 years. You could fail everything for 9 years and still be younger than I was when I started hybrid, which I'm not saying that's like the pinnacle of success. It's not the pinnacle of success. There are some people who have gone way farther and done way more and helped a lot of people. And that's great. I want to keep building myself. I keep wanting to try to do more and try to help more people. But that's something that a lot of people know me for, is through hybrid. You might be watching this because of hybrid calisthenics. I started it when I was 26. I started posting videos when I was 26, right? I had the idea a couple of years ago, and I started researching fitness and calisthenics a few years before that. But I didn't really post my first video for it until I think late 2019, early 2020. So that does help us sometimes when we're like, okay, so I want to move fast day to day. I don't want to dilly-dally. But if I mess up, if today didn't go as planned, this week didn't go as planned, or even this month didn't go as planned, when this project failed. First of all, a lot of people have failed projects. Most successful people in whatever industry or whatever field you're trying to pursue have failed projects. That's okay, right? Like there's usually steps back, and hopefully we can learn from that to take several steps forward. And I'll follow up and I'll finish up with a metaphor that a lot of people use, that we can usually go farther if we plan using patience. If we have the patience to build a strong foundation, we can usually launch ourselves further than just trying to do the short-term game. You've heard like taking, it's a business thing, but long-term profit versus short-term profit. But a metaphor that people use, and I'll actually go into it because I hear a lot of metaphors, but I don't hear it practically applied. But a metaphor is, so there's a tree here, it's dark, right? And there's some family visiting. And if you see me fidgeting around, it's because there's a cat trying to jump onto my chair and rub against me, and I don't know. There's a tree here. And if you said, Hampton, in the next 10 seconds, I need you to run over that tree and touch the highest part of that tree that you can. And the best way that I could probably do it is I could run over there, jump, and boom. Like, I've been working on jumping, so I might be able to get like 30 inches, boom, off the ground, touch it, cool, right? And that would be okay. That would be a short-term way of touching the tree. But if you say, well, no, you have 5 minutes, I would go get, well, actually, I have a ladder right here. So they would have to, imagining I didn't have a ladder, but I would get a ladder, go up there, climb up, and touch that. And we say, well, Hampton, you have an hour. It's like, okay. Or you have a day. I might call my friend who has a crane and be like, okay, well, can you bring me up there? Right? And I'll pay the friend, I'll invest, and I'll touch the highest part of that tree. And then I would win this tree touching contest. The best result that I can obtain is relative to the time frame that I'm giving myself. And if I want something, if you tell yourself, I want to do this within a day, I want to do this within 10 seconds, you're probably going to be a little bit more limited because you won't be thinking in a perspective that allows you to maximize your results. So have you heard the saying, live every day as if it's your last day? I understand that for some things, right? You don't want to live in general with things that you know you'll regret. But hopefully you have more than one day left to live. And sometimes when we're making plans, we don't want to plan as if we're only going to live one more day. If we're only going to live one more day, then it doesn't really matter how many debts you accrue. But if you live longer than that, it does matter. So that's one way that you should watch out for that. But to go further past the metaphor a little bit, because like a lot of people hear like this, like jumping, there's like racing, how far you can go, you can get in a car, and then there's like short-term profits. But I want to think about a way that people can actually visualize this for their goals. And a lot of people have some kind of, especially people watching this, usually younger, they have some kind of business ambition, right? You don't have to be rich, once again, but you want to build something, you want to do something. Sometimes it's just about making your own way in the world. It's like, man, I'm 17 or 18, my parents were accountants, and that's cool, but is that what I want to do? Is that what I'm meant to do? So like a lot of days, there's a lot of stuff about like the reason we exist, right? And I don't want to call it a crisis, but a lot of people have this conundrum of like who they're supposed to be, who they are. And business is a big part of that. So making your own way in the world. And a lot of people, they ask, like, well, I want to get started. They like, maybe they've been sitting around for a while, but they get a call to action and they say, well, I want to get started. How can I make the most money in like 30 days? Or sometimes you have to pay a bill or something, which I get, that's a stressful situation to be in. But ideally, if you were to make the most money that you could in 30 days, within moral and legal bounds, right? So that's already kind of niching down a little bit, but moral legal bounds. Well, I usually tell people, it's like, well, if you might be able to transcribe things. So if you look up transcription services, especially in the US, I know that some people outside the US struggle with that, but basically just listening to things and writing them down. It's changed a little bit because like the advent of what we're calling AI and different tools, that's a little bit more accurate now, and we may not need as many humans to do that. But for a while, that was paying like $10, $12 an hour, right? And for that matter, you say, well, that's only if you need to work from home. If you need to make $10, $12 an hour in the US, depending on your state, you might be able to go get a job just somewhere that's hiring. That's an entry-level job, and you can make money there, which there's nothing wrong with that. It really depends on what you want to do, and if that's what you need to do, what you want to do or need to do, if you have bills you got to pay right now, that might be the way to do it. But as you can see, the most amount of money that you can make in 30 days is not to scale with the most amount of money or the most business success, if you want to think not money, that you can make in a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. Because if you're like, well, if you want to think past your 30-day goal and think, okay, you can do that. And what do you want to do in 10 years? Well, in that case, you're like, well, I might want to build a foundation. So like, this is the equivalent of getting the ladder, getting the cars, like, and that's a common thing, not even in an entrepreneurship way, but just like a formal education way where, I may want to go to college. right? Or not just college, but I may want to acquire some extra skills that I can better help people with. Once again, not even just money. I want to help people with these skills. So first, I have to learn these skills. First, I have to either go to school or learn from someone who knows this. It's hard to do in one day. It's hard to do in 30 days. But usually, if we give ourselves a few years, a few months, excuse me, I have this timer so I don't go on too long, then we can take our time to do that. But the good thing is that you can do both. And when people are like, I just want to try this thing, I usually don't discourage them. Try it out. Try it out. Because it usually can sometimes give us a result and we're like motivated by it. It's like, man, I got my first paycheck. It was like for $700. That's more money than I've ever made, right? So I remember that. So like most business people, if you talk to them, it's like, what was your first paycheck? They usually have like a very fond memory of that. It's like, and you ask them how much it was. They're like, oh, well, it really wasn't a whole lot. And I know some people are blessed to make that. It's wonderful. But usually, hopefully that grows, right? I'm all for getting that early result to get some motivation and just prove to yourself that you have the ability to do this. But you can do that while still planning for the long term. So if you're feeling antsy, you want to do stuff, then yes, 100%. Do the stuff that you need or want to do now, but still plan and build for the future. That's how you can use patience for your long-term goals. And very importantly, don't just be so caught up in the day-to-day of like, well, this is what I need to do right now, or what do you think you need to do right now, that you don't have time to plan for the future. So if you want to do a little bit, like depending on what you're able to do, right? Like depending on how much time and energy and how healthy you are, if you're able to spend half your day working your regular job to pay your current bills, but half of your other day, and that's like, I know sometimes that's going into like 10 p.m., 11 p.m., you want to get enough rest, you want to be healthy, but in your free time, if you're able to work towards your goal, it's like, well, I actually want to be an astronaut, so I'm going to start studying for that, or I actually want to be an engineer, so I'm going to start applying for different schools. It's like, man, my writing isn't very good, and it's affecting my applications. How can I improve writing? So maybe I'll study for and practice my writing for an hour or 2 hours a day. These are all things we can take, and how you can have ambition in the short term and work hard in the short term, but how you can balance that by still using patience when it comes to pursuing your goals, and hopefully achieve them a little bit faster and help some people with them. Thank you so much for watching, and have a beautiful day, my friend.